As the official healthcare provider of Minnesota United, Allina Health is dedicated to delivering pro-level care for our Loons. But our partnership goes much deeper than what happens on the field. From our shared support of youth-focused nonprofits like Roots for the Home Team to empowering adaptive athletes to the MNUFC Power Soccer Team, Allina Health and Minnesota United are committed to making our communities all together better. Learn more at allinahealth.org/loons. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Sound of the Loons presented by Allina Health. And this time I get to be joined by the other man, the myth, the legend of Minnesota soccer, Amos Magee. I appreciate you taking the time because I know you are a very busy man. And I just got to say, my first question on here says, how was the summer off? Is there any such thing as an off season? I feel like, and you guys have revamped the whole academy. You're like Mr. Academy Youth Development now. So how are you?
It's good. There is time off for our coaches, and they've earned it. And so I'm pleased. You know, we had one of our coaches, Alex Morawecki, who's in charge of our U18 team, take his family down to Mexico City and do a month immersive in Mexico. Jamie Carroll Rolfe has had his first kid. He's in charge of our 16s team.
So he's definitely not taking him off. He's on dad duty instead of.
He's on dad duty, exactly. But he did get, I think, to take his daughter to meet his family in England. So those guys got a chance to get away, recharge, but we had a lot to do as we still transition to new technical leadership with Khaled on board. Part of my roles and responsibility have expanded to the second team. So working with Jeremy and the staff with the second team and making sure that as we start transitioning players up and down, that's a really nice flow to how it works. I got the chance to spend a little bit more time with them. So that was good. So for me, not a summer off, but you pick and choose and find little moments to get with your family and make sure you get a chance to recharge as well.
Yeah, I mean, we are fortunate in that Minnesota is about one of the greatest places to be in the summertime when you get the weather and the lakes and the parks and the outdoors and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully you got some time to spend with the family. But I wanted to ask you a little bit about your role. I mean, now that, what are you, a year plus into this? I know it's already changed since you took this role, but how long has it been now? I can't even keep track of the changes, the movement.
Yeah, I mean, I think I sort of transitioned over in officially, I don't know, maybe November of 22 or 23. So I've sort of embarking on my third academy season, but really sort of my second one where, I was starting to figure out how to align the academy better with the club vision and values. And that's been a big lift for me. So I would say this is sort of my second full year with it. But already it's changed so much.
I was just going to say that.
And then assuming, really this pathway role and really trying to connect the academy with the second team and the second team with the first team. So it's the job and the role sort of is, doesn't look anything like it did when I kind of shifted over from scouting and recruitment. So, but all really good, exciting pieces and energizing. And so I look at it as real positive movement forward, and as opposed to sort of squeaky stop-start stuff. So.
Well, and you didn't want to feel left out. I mean, there have been so many other changes within the club and the first team and the staff. And I mean, I remember talking to Jeremy, it might have been at the end of last year, beginning of this season. I can't even remember now, but same thing, just his role, how it's changed, and then just the fluctuation of what's happened with the first team. But can you just sort of give some insight to people that are listening and maybe they don't know who you are, they don't know your history with this club in the state of Minnesota and soccer, your passion sort of for youth soccer and development and the pathway and why this role maybe suits you and what you find so, interesting and rewarding about it?
Yeah, so I mean, I came to Minnesota from DC United to as director of player personnel, heading out scouting and recruitment. Because we were basically a startup that also involved some salary cap management, that involved, trades and allocation disbursement, and a lot of those pieces, all of which I found to be really engaging. Previous to that, I was a coach here in Minnesota with the Thunder, and then in Portland with the Timbers, and in DC with DC United. But in Portland and in DC United, in Portland, I was in charge of the second team. And then in DC United, I was in charge of their U23 team. So this idea of having good young players and trying to push how they transition and develop into, what we hope will be impactful first team players, that is a piece that I really enjoyed and, a part of development that I've really tried to stay attuned to. And so now in this role, with the academy and in the second team, I'm able to really try to see and shape the experience of players as they come into our academy, even as early as 11, 12, 13 into our pre-academy program, into our U15s, U16s, U18s, and then on into our second team. And then what we hope will be a transition into the first team at Minnesota United. So trying to shape that experience, talk to our coaches about how to make it the most productive experience. That's really in my wheelhouse, and I really enjoy it. And we've got a really good staff that sees things similarly. And so all of us together come in every morning pretty excited to roll up our sleeves and get to work with these kids.
You just mentioned the age groups, and I know that was a change that just came about, and the season just got underway for you guys. And I know I just want to we'll touch on that in a minute, the pretty fabulous opening weekend that you guys had. But what does it mean for the age group shift? I mean, is that like a big deal? Is it not a big deal? Some people might look at it and go, okay, we went from 15, 17s and 19s to 15, 16s and 18s. To the outside world and in your world, is that a big shift? Is it not a big shift? What does that mean for you guys?
It isn't really a big shift. So the pro player pathway, which is the age groups that MLS academies focus on, were 15 and 17s, U15, U17. They've shifted this year up an age group, U16 to 18. We had a U19 group. We were one of only 4 MLS teams that played a U19 group in the league. One of the reasons was clubs were prioritizing younger players. We were prioritizing our U19s because we felt like as a development market, we were just a little bit behind, and getting that extra year really helped our players see out the path of the development as youth soccer players. So we felt U19s were important. But the issue is a lot of clubs, and as our academy gets better, and it is getting better, and our coaches are better, and we're bringing in better players, players are more ready to jump into the second team a little bit sooner. So by shifting to 16 and 18, the way the entire league has shifted at Pro Player Pathway, we still are playing really high level, impactful games at a U18 level. And at that point, we're starting to recognize and putting players a little bit sooner into roles and being a little bit better prepared athletically, because we get the extra year from 17s to 18s. And we think that we can jump some more into the second team more effectively and quicker. So that's kind of the reason the league shifted over from 15 and 17 to 16 and 18s. We felt that we needed an extra team. We needed an extra year to get players ready to jump in to the U16 level, which is competitive and comparative to any U16 level worldwide. And I say that because we play against these teams. We play against Arsenal, Man United, Palmeiras, Botafogo, Boca Juniors. We play against these teams at GA Cup, and we're very competitive with them. So I know that our development system, where we are in MLS Next and MLS Academies, is right up there with the rest of the world. And jumping straight into that from let's say ECNL or Elite Academy or USYS, although there's some clubs doing a really good job at those levels, and really doing a good job developing players, we found that the jump was too big. So we assumed the U15 or kept the U15 team, which really moves away from pro player pathway. I know there's a lot of word garbage here to try to sort through. But again, we wanted an extra year to get our players ready to jump into a pro player pathway at U16. And that's what we're doing. And, already a month into preseason and into our, a week into our season, we feel like the work that we've done over the past year is really paying dividends already.
Isn't that amazing, though? And I mean, I love that you get to see it firsthand, and you played yourself. You skipped over that whole part of your history and what your career was, but how much maybe the youth system has changed, and the level and the expectation, maybe from players, from parents, from coaches, from clubs. It's so different than when you played and when I played. But how rewarding then when you see something that you've put so much time and energy in to come into a freshman. I know it's only, the preseason, and I think, 1 weekend under your belt. But when you see this progress, even that the academy has made over the last few years, or since 2017, since Minnesota United went into MLS, is that rewarding then to see? And then when you see these guys go up to the second team, you see them get pulled into the first team, and you see what that means to them, and then when they can make an impact on the first team.
It's tremendous. I mean, it's really kind of why you do it. So, it's thrilling and rewarding. And I would say, we think results are important at the development level, simply because part of their development is figuring out how to win games. Okay, so that's part of it. Part of their development is playing with anxiety, playing in high pressure situations. To do that, you have to play against good teams. You have to win games. You have to have games matter and meaning and have meaning. And so, our coaches are competitive. We all are all competitive here at Minnesota United. So we do want to win games. But we also look at the process to how we go about doing it and look at the significance that takes as well. And I will say, while it's just 1 weekend, and, we got great results. All three teams win. We didn't concede at all. We looked like we were playing the way Khaled and Eric want us to play, proactive, front foot, defensively tenacious, pretty quick to go to goal. All of those hallmarks we exhibited with our three academy teams. Beyond that, the work that our coaches have done in the first month of the season, as I observe them, our players are further along. They just are. And we've got some better soccer players with better tactical ideas. They're a little bit ahead technically. A lot of that comes from the club coaches in the area and outside of the area that we've developed relationships with and recruited players from. But a big part of that goes to the identification that our coaches and scouting staff have done, and then the work that our coaches are doing when they have the players in. So we're pleased with where we are. I don't know over the course of the season whether our results will be any better than they've been over the past. I assume they will be, but every team is getting better and every club is getting better and coaches are getting more sophisticated, and we've got to keep up and increase our pace to eventually catch the top clubs and top academies, which, we plan to do.
So how has that evolved or changed since Khaled and Eric have come about, or what's their input on the academy? Because then again, you're talking about new pieces, new ideas. Khaled and Eric had never worked together before. Now you're putting them in with all of you guys who have been there for a bit of time, but, trying to mesh and mold this thing to get what is best out of these young men, but also what ultimately helps the first team and the teams they're currently playing on in the academy. So how has that gone? What's that evolved? How has it evolved? And what's Khaled's vision, and how has it sort of trickled down to what you guys do?
It's been significant. First of all, Eric comes from an environment similar to from where I came, where he was in the academy and he coached Chelsea's U23s, and then he gets into Man United, and even Man United, one of the biggest clubs in the world, still has a commitment to play younger players and move younger players along. So he comes from that system and recognizes the value of taking a talented player, young player, and putting them into the environment, even at a first team level, and just seeing how they do, and then kind of start to adjust off of how they climatize to the level. So that's been significant. The feedback and the conversations I've had with Eric have been really exciting and just a really nice, it's got a nice way about him and they've been really fruitful. But then it comes from Khaled, and his vision is that we are going to change youth soccer in Minnesota. It's going to be one of our lasting legacies to try to help move everybody along as best we can in a leadership position. But a big part of that is prioritizing and fast tracking development of some kids. So, we've had, I think, 15 or 16 academy players make their debut with the second team. We've signed now Loic, who joined our academy, I think 18 months ago. He's I think 18 months ago, he's already in with maybe 24 months ago. He's already in with signed a first team contract. We have Darius Randall, who's played 20 plus games with the second team, just signed a second team contract. And the hope and expectations will push him along the way we did with Loic. Cage Romanchin has had an excellent year with a second team before sustaining an injury. And then we have a lot of academy players which are pushing to sign professional contracts in with our second team. So that type of commitment to younger players, commitment to the pathway, to say, we're going to get them into our environment. We're going to see how they do. We're going to continue to press and push them, and that there are professional contracts waiting for them at the, as they move forward. That's been night and day from where we've been, and makes our coaches more excited. It makes our players more excited. It really puts an emphasis on what we're doing as it relates to the overall growth of the club, and we couldn't be happier to participate in that.
How do you know when a player is ready? I know you just said Eric likes to sometimes bring a player into and kind of see how they do in a training session or whatever. But in general, how do you know if a player is ready to move up to, whether it's to the twos or to the first team? And I'm not talking on a permanent basis, but even for a training session, how does that, what goes into that thought process? There's some sort of a checklist that a bunch of coaches sit down and have a conversation about a player?
So we're working on kind of the process of doing our best job to dot our I's, cross our T's, line up our KPIs, line up all the different pieces, which gives us the best sense. In the end, Kyndra, you don't know. You have a kid that's dominating their age group and you move them up. And if they continue to dominate that age group, then you keep moving them up. Make sure that they're physically able to handle the load and the competition level, that they're emotionally ready to handle the trials and ups and downs that it'll take if they move into a professional environment. You hope that the tactical and technical work that you've done with them, and that their youth club coaches have done with them prepares them for it. But in the end, you don't know. So you do your best guess. You think a kid's ready, you move them up. Some of them swim, some of them sink. The ones that sink, you don't give up on. You say, maybe it's not the right time right now. You try to reflect on why it didn't quite work. You get them back into their age group or still amateur soccer, try to make sure you get their confidence back. You get them better prepared. Then you move them up again and you see. And so we've had a lot of the start stop with some kids that have bumped up to the second team, done okay for a little bit. Then it's all caught up with them. They started to not do as well. So we move them back, let them get confident, get some games, succeed again. And then we move them up. And some kids we've moved into the second team and they've just flown and flourished right away. And we've, kind of in our mind thought that we were going to move them back, but we haven't because they're doing so well at a second team level. And then a couple of them have jumped into first team training and done really well. So, you don't ever really know. But as you get better and better at this, I think you got a better and better success rate to know when kids are ready. And so that's what we're trying to figure out.
To that point you mentioned earlier, that results do matter because they need to learn how to win and all these other things. So when you're moving kids up and down, how do you form a cohesive group? How do you form a team when there's pieces moving up and down and around and sideways, and there's a lot of change there, whether it's for the coaching staff who's in charge of that team where a player is being taken out, maybe it's your best player and they've just been pulled up, or it's joining the team above them. How do you manage that with winning, the development
Right.
with the winning?
Right. Well, listen, our U17 team last year playing the top level of pro player pathway would have won a lot more games if we had had Darius Randall available to us the entire season. But we knew what was best for Darius was to push him into the second team. He played with us at GA Cup. So we got a little sense of him in his own age group. But for the most part, starting in January, he was in with the first team at preseason, then he was in with the second team, and we saw him as a second team player. What that did is that opened up an opportunity for another player at the U17 level. And so the idea is that we hope that the next player steps in, really flourishes at that level. Darius flourishes at the second team level. Then eventually Darius moves up to the first team. That player moves up to the second team, and we have another younger player that fills in, and off we go, and on we go. So we're competitive. We do want to build a broader group of players. We do want the clubs in the area to do an even better job than they're already doing at building players. So we fill in, we bottom fill with players as we move players through, out into teams beyond, above and beyond. So that's why, leadership in the market, good communication, good relationships with the youth clubs in our area is so important, because we know that how important the job that they're doing. We want to help more and help them figure out a way to do an even better job of developing, individual players in the collective. But again, to go back to the player movement of players moving up and down, we don't ask our academy coaches to play a similar system all throughout the club. Okay. Part of it is there's different sets of players available to different coaches at different age groups. Furthermore, we ask our coaches to focus on some of the top players. If you have 4 outstanding center backs, the first team is playing 4 and back. We may play 3 and back, so 3 of the 4 are always playing. But the principles and how we want to play, regardless of system, we try to institute all the way from the first team down to our pre-academy. So Eric wants to eventually be a high pressure, high pressing team that is pretty vertical, gets to goal pretty quickly. We try to institute that through our academy. They can do it in a 3-4-3. They can do it in a 4-4-2. They can do it in a 5-3-2. We have conversations about that, but we don't dictate that they've got to play a certain system. But we do want the qualities that we're trying to develop in our first team to be developed into our academy. So now when Darius Randall jumps from the 17s to the second team, he knows that he's got to be pressing. He knows that he's got to look to go to goal. He knows he's got to run without the ball and try to get in the penalty box on the weak side as much as possible. Because regardless if he's playing a wing back, a winger, or a wide midfielder, those are the expectations that he has. So that's the way we think about it.
You just mentioned the relationship that you try to have with the clubs in the state in particular. But how does someone know, how does a player know if it's right for them to stay at their club team, to stay ECNL, GA, whatever it is, because there's so many different options now, or come and try out for an academy team? How does a family know that? And then also that can sort of, transition into the homestay program, which is important to you guys and something that you guys have added.
Yeah. So I think what they need to do is they need to come try out and just see what the level's like. And then our guys are pretty good. We're all pretty good at trying to figure out the best way, the best path for some players. We let some really good kids from our academy leave our academy because they weren't getting games. And we felt like they're at the point in their development that they needed games. They weren't getting them here with our academy. There were just players who were ahead of them. And so we encouraged them to go back to a club, go play high school, try to get some games in. will that inevitably potentially hurt results for us this season? Yeah, maybe. But what'll end up happening is, of those 8 or 9 kids that have gone to Minneapolis United or someplace else, they may end up developing so that a year later they're going to be ready to be impactful and get games at our level. And then maybe another kid has sort of fallen to the back end of the roster and then needs to leave our academy to go get games as well. We had about 3 or 4 kids into our U15 team that were 2011s. Really good, I thought, really exciting players. I still think they're really exciting players. We also talked to their club coach and thought, let's make them training players with us through the fall. Let's let them get games at their club team during the fall. Let's reevaluate where players are moving. And the expectation is then they'll be ready to go and be very impactful for us into 2015. So we try to get a sense that it may be a short-term ding to the competitiveness of our academy, but if we try to do the right thing by the kids over the long term, inevitably that'll be right for the kid, right for the family, and right for our academy. Having a kid sit at the end of your roster, train really hard, and go through the disappointment of training and not getting many games on the weekend, that can discourage them. That can, mean that they develop ways to be successful and survive in training, but can't figure out how to do it in a game, which inevitably hurts their long-term development, which is what we don't want. So that's the way we think about it, and try to do the best job we can of putting players at the right level at the right time in their development. We get some wrong, I'm sure, but I think we
no.
Yeah,
I'm sure. No, not possible, right? That's the whole beauty of it. It's some of it's a little bit trial and error, and each kid is so different. And then, can you just hit on the homestay program really quickly, because I think that's something that I know I've talked to you about it before, and implementing it and sort of what that means and how that sort of broadens maybe the players and the group that you can reach by having that as an option.
Yeah, so we do have a homestay program. We recruit families to host kids from out of market. These are everybody in our academy now they're minors. So we don't put them up in apartments. We don't put them up in dorms. We need to make sure that, that there's parental supervision. So we have some amazing host families. We, recruit them.
How do you get I was just going to say, how do you get those families to commit to that? Because that's a whole nother
relationship driven. We do have an application online. If people are interested, we'd love to have them, apply and reach out. And then we put players in, we pay a stipend so that the family isn't assuming the huge cost of housing and feeding an aspiring soccer player. And then it broadens our ability to develop players beyond just players who are in the Twin Cities, whether it's outstate Minnesota, whether it's Wisconsin, where we have several players. We have a couple players from Michigan this year, a player from Las Vegas. We had one last year. The way we think about it at Minnesota United is those players really need to be the right quality and the right character to really lift our group here. If not, I would just prefer we bring in Minnesota players who have developed in this market, who are going to, potentially recontribute to this market once they're done out of our academy. Minnesotans tend to not leave Minnesota very often, so we'd love to have those guys in and around part of our family for long term. But we also recognize that there's different personalities, different development, different players that if we bring in out of market can really add to what we're doing. So they need to be special players. They need to be special people. And if we find that they are, then we recruit them. We try to find the right match with the host family. And I think right now we have about 5 or 6 kids in our homestay program. And we're quite pleased with all of them.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. I'm going to make sure. I mean, I always tell, my daughter plays for NSSA, but I always tell all the families that we know who have brothers. And obviously there's a lot of family we still have over at St. Croix and other places, but to go and watch academy games and 2 games. because everybody, not that there's anything wrong with going to first team games, as we all know, but I just think it's important for them to go and watch the academy teams at the different levels, the different age groups and the twos, because that is most likely you're going to be your path before the professional. I just think it's so cool to watch at that level and what that looks like, and the crowds that come out. So I always encourage that. So I appreciate you taking the time, and I'll let you
I will just say, Kyndra, that September 21st, so Saturday the 21st, we play against Chicago Fire up here in Blaine on Field 60. So the exhibition field right next to the stadium. Chicago Fire has an outstanding academy, a bunch of kids in with the national team. It'll be a huge step forward for our group to play against them. But it should be really, really good youth soccer. And I encourage everybody to come out and see our kids play, because it'll be a heck of a day.
September 21st. The good old
9 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 1 o'clock.
Oh, that's what I love. I was just going to ask you, but also like good old U2 is what we used to call that field back in the day.
Yep.
That grass looks pretty dang nice now. Every time I walk by it, I'm like, okay, I wish I could be out there right now and not pull a hammy.
Cool.
All right. Thanks, Amos. Have a great rest of your day. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. All right, everybody. Segment number 2 with head coach Eric Ramsey coming up next. Just because the Loons are away doesn't mean you have to watch the match from home. With Loons Watch Spots, presented by Coors Light, you can find a piece of that Allianz Field atmosphere at some of your favorite Twin Cities locations. Check out the full list of locations and upcoming watch parties at MNUFC.com/Loons Watch Spots. All right, everybody. Segment number 2 of Sound of the Loons, presented by Allina Health. We just wrapped up with Amos Magee to give us the whole lowdown and the scoop on the academy. Now we get to be joined by head coach Eric Ramsey to give us the lowdown and the scoop on the first team. It feels like it's been forever, because you actually didn't have to play during this international break with 8 or 9 guys missing, which had to be a little bit of a reprieve for you. How are you, head coach Eric Ramsey?
Yeah, we've had a really good couple of weeks, and as you say, nice to not experience the stresses and strains as we have done during international breaks previously. So we've tried to make sure everyone's got a bit of what they've needed. We've trained with a group. We've had a group play for the second team. We've had some of the guys that have come in recently do some extra work, and we've also had some time off. So I think by the time everyone gets back from the internationals and the group comes back together again on Thursday, hopefully everyone's in a good place, and we'll certainly be far better positioned than we've been at the end of these previously.
Okay, so that's actually a good, I just was thinking of this because you guys also had a bit of time off as far as not having a game after Leagues Cup, right? Or not making it out of the group stage. So how did you balance what you needed to accomplish in these training sessions, right? Of the last couple of weeks before the regular season kicked back off again, and then now having this international break and all these new guys in. How do you as a coach sort of balance what that all looks like?
Yeah, I think going out of the Leagues Cup was obviously it's a blessing and a curse in some senses, in that it was then for us the beginning of what is probably the third iteration of this group. So it genuinely feels for us like we've had 3 seasons in one. When you look at the groups that we've had, it's very clearly been Group 1, Group 2, and now Group 3. And post the Leagues Cup, we were able to have a bit of time, a bit of a reset, and that was important for us. We wanted a genuine before and after point for us to be able to draw a line under what has happened in that middle period of the year, and be able to integrate some of the new players. So we're obviously grappling with the fact that these guys are coming in with very different timelines. They're coming in from all over the world, some of whom have done a couple of weeks training, some of whom have done nothing with a team, but something by themselves. Some of them have played a good number of games for the team that they're leaving. So we were trying to just piece all those pieces together and make sure that when we did start again with that first game against Seattle, that we were in a really good shape. And albeit that result didn't go our way, we felt as though the performance was largely positive. positive. And then we've obviously had a good result against San Jose over there. So we feel like we're in a good place. We feel like this international break in some senses came at the wrong time, in that it's another dent to the momentum, and we'll experience that again prior to the end of the season. But we did feel like we got that genuine before and after point after the Leagues Cup, and for us this feels like the start of a new season, which is a really important thing.
Well, and speaking of going into this break with some momentum, that game against San Jose on the road, what did that feel like? How did it feel to have most of your pieces in place at that point? I think Pereira was the only one that you were still waiting for to kind of get in the mix, to my knowledge. So what was the sort of method behind that San Jose game? It feels like an eternity ago now, but again, to go into the break with a win.
Yeah, it was really important for us, and certainly important for the feeling of the 2 weeks that we've had since, and the momentum that we have, that we can pick back up on Thursday when the group gets back together and approach the St. Louis game with. The context of this season is we've used more players than any other team in the MLS. We've used a huge number of players across what is a small number of games, and the fact now that we've got to a point where the group feels stable, we can see the next couple of months ahead of us pretty clearly without too many disruptions. We feel like every day feels very purposeful. We've got a real sense of competition, and this is not in any way disrespectful to the group that we had midway through the season, but obviously that was pretty much an amalgamation of the second team and the first team. A lot of the guys from the second team they're aspiring MLS players. They're really knocking on the door. They're young. They're boys in some senses, and it feels now like you've got a group of men that are really competing to move the group into the right direction. And we've got that healthy tension around training, and I think we had that healthy tension in the week leading up to the San Jose game, and it's exactly how we want it to feel. We want it to feel like it's difficult to get into this group. It's difficult to get into the team. We want to look at the bench and feel like there's number one, a group of players that are very capable of contributing to the team's success at MLS level, but number two, some pieces that we can change games with and really evolve the team from a tactical perspective. So I think as a staff we've really enjoyed this new challenge as much as we took some satisfaction from the challenge midway through the season. I think this is certainly a nicer challenge to have.
But have you used a field player as a goalkeeper?
We haven't. I think that was a new extreme. I'd purposely not dialed in too much the stuff over the weekend because we had some time off and we went away. And then when I caught up with it, it seemed like that had caused a bit of uproar. So no, we haven't been quite stretched to those limits, but probably everything but.
Yeah, I was sitting on my plane on the way home from Chicago on Sunday morning and had to pull up that Wilfred Nancy little bit of a post-game presser rant that he went.
Yeah, there were a few from the weekend I'd seen.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure you were happy to not have to contribute to that as far as putting a field player into the goalkeeping position. But in that game against San Jose, though, sort of getting back to some of the tactical aspects of it. When you look at Bongi playing in that game, getting the 2 goals, but more him and Yeboah up top, or when you look at the midfield, whether it remains this way or not, Robin and Hassani and Will playing together, what was it in that game and the way that game went that allowed you to be successful, to finish the chances in the final third? Was it the way you set up, or was it just what can you put your finger on when you look at some of those tactical changes that you made?
We've wanted to return to being a team that is flexible and adaptable and can look in a number of different ways according to the players that we've got available, the form of the players, the way in which the opposition play, the conditions of certain games. And I think that was a good example of us with 2 forwards striking the balance between being able to attack the space and behind the opposition's backline well, but also having that unpredictability that I suppose Bongi playing as a second forward gives you, in the sense that he can appear between the lines, he can link, but he's also got a real feel for attacking the space behind the backline. And I think we wanted to make sure that the forwards were close enough together to benefit from one another's movement, and I think you saw that with Kelvin and Bongi. And I think largely the basis of the performance was how we defended and the control that we had in that sense, and the fact that we were largely, aside from the messy spell after we scored our first goal, able to restrict San Jose to very little. I think that gave us a good foothold, and I think that was in big part down to the ways in which we found to defend around a front two with a back five, which isn't easy. We found that tough from in previous games and other experiences where we haven't been able to build pressure well enough. We haven't been able to cover the width of the pitch well enough with the midfield three. We've ended up defending too flat as a back five and not having the wing backs jump out quick enough and support the midfielders in covering the width of the pitch. But I think we did that relatively well. And I think the fact that it has clicked with Robin, Hassani and Will playing in there is a big thing. But that's not to say that is how we will continue. We want to be a team that can be flexible and that works on the basis of principles. And I think over the course of the two games so far, we've moved in the right direction there. But definitely having the option to play with a front two and a midfield three is one that I've wanted to look at for a long time, and I've wanted to have some time to try and get it right. And I think now we've certainly got the conditions.
Well, and some of the changes you've made over the last month or two now have been out of necessity, not necessarily by choice. But what have you learned maybe about some of the players? I think I read a quote or I listened to a post game or something of you talking about Bongi and just like how he's been asked to play in a position maybe at times in the wider area where more pressure is on him and he can be a little bit more confident and free floating when he's up higher on the field. Did I read that right or hear that right?
Yeah, I think that with Bongi during the period where we were short, we were very reliant on him and Sangbin to create chances for us on the counter-attack. We didn't have much control of games. We were defending, not necessarily by choice, but we were forced to defend relatively low in games. We turned the ball over a lot and we were reliant on combinations and counter-attacks, and Bongi and Sangbin obviously provided a lot of that with their pace. I think now with the team looking so different and hopefully moving toward being a team that can have more control of games, that can create chances in a variety of ways, then you do start to see a different Bongi. We want to be a team that can be dominant in all phases of the game. Of course, we want to attack quickly. We want to have a good rhythm. We want to excite. We want to create chances. But we have to be a team that can have more control of games and connect more passes and be more connected in general as a team, and make sure that when we do get the ball into the opposition's half, we're really together and we're really well set to get the ball back. Bongi will benefit from that in the sense that now we will create chances with more organised possession as opposed to those just those quick transition moments. So hopefully you'll start to see a couple of different sides to his game. And obviously he's one of those players that if he plays closer to the middle, he's more unpredictable. Certainly for the opposition, he's got a good feel for attacking the space from deep. So yeah, it's a nice problem to have with Bongi. We feel like he's got lots of tools, lots of ingredients, and we've got to find the right way in the right games of fitting him in with the other guys that we've got around him.
So bigger picture for you then, as we take it, since we just sort of analyzed the San Jose game and sort of specifically where you're sitting at in the moment, and we will get to sort of your actual position in the table, but bigger picture for you now that you've had this many months under your belt, is there anything in particular that, that you changed your opinion on, that whether it's the league, whether it's the club, whether it's, that you have had this sort of, excitement when you came in, your first full-time head coaching job, then you get in it, you've had to change your roster several times, there's a transfer window, there's, been some ins and outs. What's sort of your overall take if you had to, give us a little snippet of how you're feeling about where it's at in the moment?
Yeah, well, I've really enjoyed this year. And I think if I was to solely look at it through the lens of what would a good year look like for you and your development as a head coach, and the number of different challenges that inevitably over the course of my career I will need to meet and prepare to meet, this season's been perfect in that sense, in that I felt it was an interesting scenario to come into. We had some real success over the course of the majority of the first half of the season. We were really competitive with the top teams in this league, right toward the top. And then I suppose the number of issues that we faced after that international break, where we played Dallas, it would have been impossible for me to foresee. There would be no conversation that I would have had with anyone coming into this that would have prepared me for the variety of problems that we encountered, and the length of time for which that ran, that period. And as much as I think there's of course a real understanding around that period, because everyone knows the context, everyone knows the difficulties that we had. No one was expecting that particular group of players to meet the expectations that the first group of players set. It wasn't without its frustrations, for all the understanding and the empathy and the I suppose the rational way of looking at it. It still had its frustrations, because everyone wants to win. No one enjoys losing successive games. No one enjoys the feeling of being the least dominant team over a relatively long period. And that for me was a really good challenge in number one, conversations with myself, conversations with the staff, conversations with the players, trying to keep the ship steady, trying to keep in mind the big picture. I think that was a really good test for me, and I hope one that I can really rest on at a point in my career where inevitably perhaps I won't encounter anything quite so extreme, but I'll of course encounter periods where we lose successive games. I'm sure it'll be something that I experience at another club in future. So I'm hopeful that I can be really thankful for that. And I know that we as a group of people, not just the coaches and the players here, but everyone around this club and this team will have learned a lot from that period. And I think when we move into next season, we'll be far better off for that, and we'll have a far better grasp on number one, what we need to do decision making wise as to how the roster needs to look, and number two, I'll hopefully have a better sense of intuition as to how things might go during that what I've repeatedly described as the very messy middle part of the season. So hopefully it's something that stands us in a really good stead. And now we're out of that, and we've got this group together, and day to day feels really good. I can look back on it with a healthy perspective, and one that I know it'll be an experience that stands me in really good stead, I'm sure.
Yeah, in the middle of it, you're like, what the? Yeah, like
for sure, it's frustrating. Yeah, it's frustrating.
You're like, okay, I want to learn a lot of lessons in my first coaching. I don't need to learn them all in the same month.
No, I mean, I'm a rational guy, but when you're adding internationals, babies, transferred out, and injuries, and quite literally almost anything that could have happened did happen. It's I think it would test the most level-headed and rational person, and I think it was largely those very intense experiences. I think they accelerate. Number one, they accelerate my growth, but they also accelerate the club's growth and the growth of the staff. And we're fortunate we've got level-headed people here. We've got a couple of players in the group that probably have a very similar mentality to the mentality that I've got. So all that contributed to some difficulty and frustration, but I think there was always that sense of round the corner, not being too far away, I suppose.
Okay, so did anybody from your prior clubs text you like in the middle of it and be like, "Okay, how are you doing over there?"
I genuinely had a few of those messages. I think obviously in England you're conditioned to the manager's life cycle being pretty short, and obviously not everyone at home is with the same context and perspective that we all had here on why there was such a slide. So I think there were probably a few people concerned for my future here at that point, but. We never had that. We had the frustration week to week for the players in some senses, because I think even in that period, and even given the circumstances, we were relatively competitive in the game. There wasn't many games where I felt that had a couple of things gone our way that we couldn't have won. And we suffered late on in games a couple of times. It was really hard to swallow. And my frustration was as much for the players as it was for me. It was really difficult to stand up in front of them after successive losses late on in games where we've really had to grind to be competitive, to sort of airbrush that. And I've always thought in my career, and I've always felt sort of being a step or two removed from a manager dealing with difficult situations, that the difference between one head coach and another, and probably the longevity and success they have, is based on how well they handle those situations where it's been really tough. You've lost in a difficult way, and the players, they need to feel that. They need to feel some accountability, and they need to feel some the weight of the coach on them, but they also need to feel like you can move forward on Monday when you come in, and that the walls aren't caving in, and that applied on a number of occasions to me and how I handled the group post game, and I think largely we were able to come through it constructively most times, but it wasn't without its difficulty.
Okay, so how has your wife handled that? How did your wife handle that stretch? Because
No, go on.
I mean, honestly, right? I mean, that's everybody takes their work home with them. And and she has been with you, obviously, through all your assistant coaching, all your different roles. But when you're the head coach, I mean, how did she handle you? Or
I
how
think
did that work?
and that's another thing I think you learn during these periods, and I think I'm fortunate to have had a period like that wasn't make or break for my career or my job or this team's fortunes, but it was still tough. And I think we're quite fortunate in the sense that we have a healthy perspective as a couple. I can see those experiences for the journey and the experience and the development. And I think she sees it that way. And then we've also got the factor of we've got two really young kids that have no idea as to what I do, how things are going. The second I walk in the door, it's almost pretty irrelevant. And I think like having children of that age in some senses is the best remedy to anything that you might be encountering at work. So we sort of got our hands full enough to not find ourselves sitting around watching the walls cave in or questioning our decision to come here.
Well, I was going to ask that because when I used to call, just Minnesota games full time, I would get home or I'd get back to my hotel room and my husband would want to like talk about the game. I'm like, dude, I just did that game for like, a half hour pregame, 30-minute program. Like, I don't want to talk about it for for more time. I just did it for 4 hours. I just need a minute. Like, I didn't know.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. It's it's not an easy position for a coach's wife or anyone's partner that's involved in sport, because sometimes it's right not to talk about it. Other times it's right to talk about it for ages. I don't think there's ever a right nor a wrong. And I think we will, as a family, sort of learn how to deal with those situations. But I think always having that sense of perspective, and there's loads of situations I think in your life that are wrapped around these difficult situations that give you a real perspective that ultimately it is sport, and full well that there's a point down the line that it will be a distant memory, the difficult periods that you go through, and you're really fortunate to be doing what you're doing and not to get too bogged down in some of that stuff, that the traps that are easy to fall in, I suppose, when you're in elite level sport. And it's very difficult sometimes to look beyond your own very narrow bubble. So I did learn a lot in that period for sure.
So to that point, when you talked about some level-headed people within the locker room, within the staff, within the organization, how has that sort of transitioned or evolved with Khaled then? Like, how has that, and I just did a podcast with him a couple of weeks ago with all the new signings and whatnot. He seems like a very level-headed individual, sort of. And he's under the same sort of new kind of pressure as you are, right? As a new head coach, new sporting director, to win, to bring players that are going to make a difference and to get it all functioning in the right direction. How has that relationship evolved?
Yeah, that's and it's exactly that. He's got a sense of a project and a bigger picture, and I think as long as between everyone who leads this organization, we feel that the work that is being done, the work that sits behind what you see on a weekend is at the level that is required. I think everyone is very happy here, and that is again part of the reason that I wanted to come here. Part of the reason that I felt as though this was a really sensible first step for me was that I knew that between me, Khaled, and Sherry, and Bill, and some of the other guys at the club, they're sensible people, and there is a genuine sense of a project. I think there will be thousands of head coaches that have been promised a project and have gone in and very quickly found that sense of project falls by the wayside after 2 or 3 losses. I think here we do have a genuine sense of something that is moving in the right direction, and of course there will be and there is pressure for the team to do well and results to come and us to be really competitive, but that is also balanced by, number one, an appreciation of how difficult this year has been, but also an appreciation of the fact that over the course of the coming years this club wants to build in a really sustainable and sensible way and try and find a competitive edge relative to the really big spenders in this league.
To that point, when you guys are currently sitting in 9th place in the Western Conference, I mean, I can't believe there's only 7 games left? 7 games left, which just seems crazy because it feels like the season is so long, and then before all of a sudden it's like almost the regular season's almost over. Do you guys as a staff, as a club, as a team sit down and go, okay, this is what we need to find ourselves in a position? Like, do you look at each game? I mean, obviously points are at a premium regardless of on the road or at home. And you guys, your record is almost the same on the road as it is just at home this year. But what do you guys look at the rest of the way before we dive into St. Louis?
Yeah, well, it'd be naive to think that people in an organization like this, players included, are capable of going one game at a time and completely ignoring the wider context. But largely that is what we try and do, because there's no point in me trying to read our current form or prospects against the last 3 months, because we are now what feels like an almost completely different organization to an extent. So it's very difficult to take our benchmark as to what we realistically should be aiming for, other than I know that when we're at our best, we can be a real match for anyone in this division. If for example, the form of the last 9 games was the form of the first 9 games or the second 9 games, we would probably end up being roughly where we want to be. And I know this is where this situation, it's tough to analyze, tough to talk around, in the sense that I know that this group is good enough to get what we need between now and the end of the year. I would certainly not shy away from saying that. And my expectation is that we do that. That is what is being talked about. That is what we are pushing for day to day. But then I'm probably the one that has to keep that sensible perspective, in that the pressure starts to creep in. That will now affect performances. Probably the distinguishing factor between the teams that make it and the teams that won't will be the teams that can deal with what feels like the magnitude of the occasions. And we're a group that has literally come together properly over the course of the last couple of weeks. So I couldn't say really how we're going to deal with those situations. So if I really had to hang my hat on it, I would say we'll do it, because we're a team that's, I know, again, as I've said, very competitive with the very best when we're at it. And I think we're showing some really positive signs, but ultimately it will again come down to how well, as the clock starts to tick, we can deal with the pressure ramping up and some of the big games that we've got to go.
So you just mentioned sort of this is like the third iteration of this team, and this is like your group, right, going forward for this final 7 games of the season. How do you see those new signings fitting in, not just from training, but how do you, every coach talks about competition and it's how it's so healthy, but I've also, guys on a roster handle competition different ways if they know if they want their team to be better, but all of a sudden when it's their position that's being threatened, it can, develop a different dynamic. So how do you see these new guys fitting in? And Pereira, can you talk a little bit specifically about him, because he's the newest one to come in?
Yeah, and we want that healthy tension, and I've used that word, that phrase a couple of times, because that is how it feels. And you're right, everyone wants to be a part of something that's moving in the right direction. Everyone wants to be a part of something that feels high level every day, which is now what we have, which I think is arguably the most frustrating factor of the middle period. Is the day-to-day it doesn't feel as you want it to feel, or as it should feel. Now we've got that, and of course that brings with it jeopardy for players, because we've got, for the first time in the last couple of weeks, we're leaving players out of squads, and there's players that have been decent contributors and have played a lot of minutes over the course of the year that have found themselves not playing from the start, which is difficult, but that is high level sport. That is how it should be and how we want it to be. So we've seen that Jefferson's come in, Jefferson Diaz, has made a good start, a really solid impact, someone that I think has the athletic qualities probably to give us a different look along the back line, and the ability to be a touch more flexible in how we defend. And obviously Kelvin he's a real focal point of the team, and he's someone that has got a big personality, a really strong sense of self as a number 9, someone that I know we can look to as a team, and he's someone who is comfortable with the team looking to him in that sense. I think you saw that in game 1. Very happy to take centre stage, very happy to be the main man there for us, and that will come with some pressure for sure for performances and goals and real contribution. But I think over the course of the first 2 games, he's shown a great deal of promise, and we've been really pleased with both of those guys and how they've contributed to the general feel of things. And then we've got some guys that will be slower with in terms of their integration. Someone like Matoush and Sam Shishoa, Anthony Markanich, I can say, and I'm not speaking out of turn, we've had these conversations. I'm sure their impact will be will possibly be less than those two and Joaquin's over the course of the remaining 7 games. But then the context for them is important too, that we will then very quickly be into a preseason, which will really be the mark of where they'll fit in the long term. Which then takes us on to Joaquin, who's obviously come in as a designated player, as someone who the team will really look to for contribution, meaningful contribution in front of goal. He's a real, he's a very goal-orientated player, I would say, in the sense that if he gets the ball, he's looking forward. He wants to play runs on the back line. He's got a really good left foot. He's very technical, very precise, and we've seen that in the first couple of weeks that he's been with us. So for us, it'll be number one, making sure that he adapts well to the physical, the tactical, the defensive demands that we place on our players, but also that the league places on them. So making sure that we see that quickly is a big thing for us, and then that we find the right way to use his qualities in the context of the rest of the players that we've got. He's a pretty versatile, flexible player, I would say, somewhere between a wide player and an 8. Definitely gravitates more toward the middle, more between the lines as opposed to on the last line. So a player that we've really needed, someone that takes the creative burden away from someone like Robin, you would say.
Well, that's actually a good point, because I was just going to ask you that, because you just talked about Kelvin, and we talked about how competition is so great, but also, you've got Tanny, who's had a pretty good season and then dealt with some injury, and I know he's away right now with Canada, but or Pookie up top. You play Bongi up top. What does that mean for Robin in the center of midfield? Because Will and Hassani, I think, are completely different players than maybe like Robin is, but Joaquin in there. I mean, these are all good problems to have.
Yeah.
At the same time, when you're trying to put your best 11 out there, or you have options now to bring off the bench and change a game depending on what the game calls for.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what we've needed. And Rob has had a really good year, but he's also suffered as a consequence of the middle period where we've had to, for many games, sort of play him, I wouldn't say out of position, because he's very comfortable in a lot of slots, Robin, and that's a big part of his quality as a player. But he's obviously at his best when he's closer to the front, when he's able to create, when he's close to goal, when he's able to play combinations with the front players. And I think based on how we played against San Jose, if sort of freeing him and Hassani up to play close to the front too, it gives us some unpredictability. It gives us a real dynamism in the wide areas, and that's ultimately where we see Rob. But I also say he's someone that can contribute in a load of positions, but I don't want him to fall victim of that versatility. And I think now we're better equipped. Hopefully, we see him in a more optimal position more often.
And St. Louis. Big game against St. Louis on the weekend. And I know they, I think they're sitting in 13th position, and there's a lot of teams that are jockeying that are sort of below that playoff line right now, or at least they're playing. They added a coaching change, as we know, but what do you see from St. Louis? And I know you're going to focus more on you guys than them, but what do you see from this?
Yeah, I think what you take from them is the situation, and that's something that we're really going to have to manage. It's obviously they're nearing sort of do or die territory, you would say, and I think we're going to see those weekends now where there's real consequence around individual games, and lots of places can be, particularly from sort of our position upwards, it's relatively tight, and we're probably in a position where we need one weekend where results go in our favour and we're right back in the mix. I think in St. Louis's case, they really need to. There's probably more pressure on them for immediate wins, and that brings with it a pressure that we have to deal with, because we're going to a place, from what I've seen, having not experienced it firsthand, that looks to have a really good atmosphere, big crowd, lots of energy, and I'm sure that plays to their advantage, and we've got to go and deal with that. We've got to dampen that, and we've got to deal with our own expectation, because we know full well that, again, if we can have a good day, a good performance, a good result, and things go our way elsewhere, then the table is tight enough for things to change very quickly. So I think it's for us that healthy balance of appreciating that, but also trying to strip that away to an extent, and focusing very much on the elements of performance that we can control, which I know if we do, then we can have a good day there.
Do you have a favorite stadium that you've been to yet? You've had a few away games under your belt now. You just mentioned St. Louis, which is a fabulous stadium.
Yeah, no, I think there's something that it's not a sit on the fence answer, but I think there's something to take from all of the places you go in, that you could go to somewhere, you could go to a smaller stadium like LAFC, and the atmosphere is incredible because of the intimacy and because of the nature of the fans there. You could go to somewhere like Seattle and perhaps the stadium isn't full, or Atlanta and the stadium's not full, but the magnitude of the stadium and how impressive some of these places are that you go and play are, there's always something interesting for me to take, and that's been a big part of this year and something that I've really enjoyed, and something I look forward to in the case of St. Louis and some of the other places that I've yet to go to and will go to next season, I'm sure.
So did anybody wrap you into a fantasy football league? You just mentioned a couple of football stadiums there. Did you get stuck in on an NFL league?
No, I haven't. I mean, it's really taken hold in the UK, the NFL, and I've got a lot of pals that will stay up until the small hours to watch the games, but it's not yet something that I've really dialed into. But I will certainly do my very best to go to a Vikings game or two.
I'm sure you'll be on that horn or whatever they have there, right? Don't they like blow a horn or
I'll probably learn my lesson from the Let's Play Hockey, so I'm sure, yes. I reckon I'll steer clear of that.
I don't know how you practice that, though. Like, there's no way to practice to get ready. Isn't Kelvin doing the first pitch tonight?
Yeah, well, I did have the chance to do that, but again, I've learned my lesson. So Kelvin's he's taken my spot. I think from what I hear today, I think he's doing it with a Vikings player, with a Timberwolves player. I think it's an occasion for the big superstar. It's definitely not an occasion for me, that one, so I'm glad I've missed that.
There was a couple of women hockey players that threw out the first pitch last night. I saw it on Twitter, and I was like, wow, their quads put most of these guys to shame.
Yeah, well, I'll say I'm not going to let him get away with it, because he's been practicing with Charlie, who was our kit man and played baseball in college, so it's not his first time, I'll say.
Oh, well, hey, as long as he doesn't bounce it in there, we're good to go. So that's that will live in infamy, I'm sure, if he does that. So awesome. Well, thank you, Coach. I appreciate you taking the time. Look forward to the game this weekend. And I know you've got a busy schedule, so thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thanks, Kyndra. See you soon.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this week's episode of Sound of the Loons. We'll see you again next week.